Dustin, so good to see you. We start with a popular and very common question. Should you tap your retirement savings to pay off your mortgage? A lot of people want to go into retirement debt-free, which is why paying off your mortgage becomes a common financial goal. But before you write that final check, you recommend crunching the numbers and thinking through some unforeseen consequences. So let's do that. And I know it's painting with a broad brush here, but should you pay off your mortgage before retiring?
Yeah, folks have really strong opinions when it comes to this, and it's largely an individual choice. But what I'll do is I'll share some of the things that I think people really miss when it comes to this decision. And probably the biggest one is when people look at their savings and investment accounts, they look at that as a number, a balance on a statement. Seldom times do they look at that and recognize that what it represents is income for the rest of your life, potential retirement income. Okay, so you need to be conscious of the fact that if you're going to go into your savings and investments and use that money to pay off a mortgage, you're going to directly reduce the potential income you would have enjoyed throughout your retirement. I'll put it to you this way. If the Social Security Administration said, Aaron, we'll pay off your mortgage, but in order to do that, we're going to have to cut your Social Security payment in half for the rest of your life. If that's not a deal that you would immediately take, then you may want to have some careful consideration on the consequences of using your own investments and savings to pay off a mortgage prior to retirement.
Yeah, I can't answer that until I sit down and actually do the math. On that note, a really important factor would be inflation, right? Because we're essentially at a fixed rate when we have a mortgage. So explain what we need to think through when, again, factoring in inflation.
Right. Inflation's big for a couple of reasons. Number one, oftentimes the reward for paying off a mortgage is smaller than people think, and that reward actually gets smaller over time. So here we're looking at a $2,000 a month principal and interest payment. Keep in mind, the principal and interest payment is the only portion of your mortgage that you can get rid of, right? That principal and interest payment, while the cost of everything else in your life goes up over time, the cost of groceries, gas, healthcare, etc., the cost of your principal and interest payment is fixed each month.
Right.
Understand, as you go into retirement, you get cost of living adjustments on Social Security. Your investments have the potential to provide you inflation adjusted income. So as you keep pace with inflation, as your income increases over time, your principal and interest payments stay flat. What that means in real terms, adjusted for inflation, the cost of your monthly principal and interest payment actually gets cheaper over time. It also means that the absence of that payment is going to have diminishing returns over time. So that chart, what it was showing was over a 30-year period at a 3% inflation rate, a $2,000 a month mortgage actually feels like making an $850 a month payment 30 years from now.
Right. That makes sense when you look at it that way. The other thing that you say is an important consideration is the equity in your home. Explain this one, please, Dustin.
Absolutely. So the purchase of a home can be a fantastic investment, but I'll tell you, in my opinion, home equity is a terrible investment. Let me explain. Here we're looking at a $400,000 equity position. So if someone had a $400,000 home, they take $400,000 from their savings and investments, pay off the mortgage, convert their income producing assets to home equity. Understand at that point, that home equity produces no returns. Okay. It doesn't generate any interest. It doesn't generate any dividends. It doesn't generate any capital gains.
Right.
Now, when I say that, people will tell me, well, Dustin, my home value goes up over time. That's true. I expect that to be the case. But remember, your home value is going to increase over time, whether you have a mortgage or whether you don't. Okay. So that's new equity that the market gives you. But if we just talk about that example, putting $400,000 into a home to pay off the mortgage, if we isolate that $400,000, here's what happens. It doesn't generate any returns over time, but it is debased by inflation. If we assume a 30-year time span and a 3% inflation rate, if your kids inherit that home 30 years later, that $400,000 in equity is going to give them a purchasing power of $170,000.
Yeah, it really is wild when you kind of look at it like that, which I think a lot of people don't. So I'm glad that we're talking this through, because this kind of does change the factor that, you really have to balance the numbers with peace of mind. So how do you help clients do that?
Right. So a lot of people are less concerned with the math. They're more concerned with how this makes them feel.
Right.
I get it. I understand that. Here's what I would say. If you are really well prepared for retirement, you're going to have more luxury to make mistakes. If you have more money than you're ever going to be able to spend, this may simply be a question, if the math doesn't work out, of reducing the inheritance that your kids may receive someday.
That's really important.
Prepared for retirement.
Mm-hmm.
Decisions like this could be the difference between a sustainable retirement and running out of money before you die.
Mm-hmm. Let's say I am one of those people, though, who tells you that I'm going to sleep better at night if I know that mortgage is paid off and I see this great big bucket of tax deferred money, which is my retirement account. Should I tap that to pay off my mortgage?
Yeah, that brings up some new considerations.
Yeah.
So in particular, tax deferred accounts like IRAs or 401ks, if you go into that bucket and you take large sums of money out of that bucket, or any sum of money out of that bucket, it's going to be taxed as ordinary income in the year that you make the withdrawals. So if you take a large sum out of a tax deferred account in a single year to pay off something like a mortgage, it could mean crossing into a significantly higher tax bracket. And because of that, what it means is you may have to withdraw a significantly higher sum out of the account once you take taxes into consideration. So you could consume a much larger balance than you might first anticipate if you're taking the money from a tax deferred account.
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind, when we're talking about tax advantaged accounts, whether it's a tax deferred account like a 401k or IRA, or a tax exempt account like a Roth IRA, hey, going into retirement without earned income, you can't put that money back in that account. So there's some opportunity costs there. The other thing I would remind you is, hey, home equity is an asset, but it's really only an asset on paper.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't generate any returns for you. And keep in mind that once you take money from your savings and investments and convert that into home equity by paying off a mortgage, that's money or value that you're not going to be able to access unless you borrow it or unless you sell.
It really is interesting to talk this through, Dustin, because it's clear after you look at the numbers, just look at the money, it can change how you feel about it, which is why this is such an important conversation to have. So if somebody would like to sit down with you, look at the math, talk it through with you, what's the best way to reach you?
They can give us a call or a text at 830-476-2505 or reach out on the web to book a free chat at longlivemymoney.com.
Great. Again, Dustin, thank you so much for your time today. This was a fun conversation.
Thanks, Aaron.